Hi, I'm Joe Himmeley, and today, by special invitation, I'm at the Riversdale House Museum Historic Site in Riverdale Park, Maryland. Riversdale is located in northern Prince George's County, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. The house was built for Henri and Marie-Louise Stier, who were Belgian aristocrats fleeing the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution. The Stiers arrived in the United States in 1794. Construction began on Riversdale in 1801 and was completed in 1807. Henri left the house to his daughter Rosalie, who married George Calvert. George was the grandson of the 5th Lord Baltimore, who was the proprietary governor of Maryland. Rosalie and George had 9 children at Riversdale, 5 of whom lived to adulthood. One of their sons, Charles Benedict Calvert, helped found the Maryland Agricultural College, now known as the University of Maryland. The Stiers and the Calverts were not the only families to occupy Riversdale. Records show that Henri Stier enslaved at least 15 people at the time of its construction, and Rosalie and George enslaved nearly 80 people. Their son Charles Benedict enslaved at least 55 by 1850. These men, women, and children were forced into labor for the Calvert family alongside paid and indentured workers, creating generational wealth, a privileged lifestyle, and the house you see today. Thanks to the diary of enslaved laborer Adam Francis Plummer, much is known about the daily life of the enslaved community at Riversdale. The diary records the names of other free blacks and enslaved individuals, important family events, including births, deaths, and marriages, inventories of possessions and prices paid for purchases, clippings from newspapers, and descriptions of community events. Riversdale was built through enslaved and paid labor using a 5-part plan, also known as a Palladian plan. The first part is the large main house in the center. There are 2 smaller structures, or wings, on either end, and 2 even more diminutive connections called hyphens that connect the house to the wings. This house is very similar to the ones the Stiers owned in Europe. On that house, the roof was made of terracotta, but that was not available here in America. Instead, they used a wooden shake shingle roof and painted the shingles to look like terracotta. The first space you encounter when you enter the home is the foyer. You will immediately be impressed by the very high ceilings and the transverse design, which is uncommon in American homes during this time, but popular in Europe. And when you're looking up, you will see a metal tube in the wall. This is actually a chimney. The house had a removable stove that would be installed in the wintertime to warm the space and then removed the rest of the year to provide more space in the foyer. Directly off the foyer, you enter the salon. This would have been used as the primary entertaining space. The floor cloth is a reproduction of what would have been here when Rosalie and George lived here, as is the paint color on the walls, both based off discoveries of the originals. The salon has floor-to-ceiling triple-hung arch-topped windows. Originally, these would have overlooked the grounds of the property with views of the garden and a man-made lake that the Calverts created. So check this out. This is the first sash down here, and you can see the sash cord for it. The second sash is here, and you can find the second sash cord. And here's the third sash, and this is what makes it a triple sash window. In the summer, you could open these to allow air to flow into the house. And again, there are very high ceilings which both impress visitors and allow the heat to rise to keep occupants cooler. And check out the stunning crown moldings. The center portion is original to when George and Rosalie lived here, and the grape leaf pattern above and below was likely added by Charles Benedict. These pilasters are original, and I love the detailing that are on them. I also really like how the arch detail at their top matches the arches over the windows that are right to the side. To one side of the salon is the parlor. This is where the women would have come after meals while the men stayed in the dining room. The parlor was staffed and served by enslaved labor, just as the dining room was. Even though it's still undergoing restoration, you can see a clock that was purchased by one of the Calverts, a pair of original Calvert-owned mirrors, a bench that dates back to George and Rosalie's time in this home, and copies of paintings that would have been in the home. Sadly, the mantle is not original, but they know that the original was ornate marble. On the other side of the salon, you'll find the dining room, which has family portraits. Here you can see paintings of Rosalie and one of her daughters, Caroline, as well as George Calvert, painted by renowned portraitist Gilbert Stuart. And there's also a portrait of Henri Stier. The marble fireplace is a replica of what the original would have looked like. It's jarring to modern taste to see something as colorful as this, but it would have been the height of fashion at the time. What you don't see in this room are representations of the enslaved workers who would have executed a multitude of tasks to enable the Calverts to host lavish dinners. Across from the dining room is the pantry, where both dishes and food staples were stored. The pantry was kept under lock and key by Rosalie due to the expensive nature of things like spices and a lack of trust for those individuals who weren't perceived to be of her class. You may also notice that the ceiling and doors here are lower than in the other rooms. This was done to create a mezzanine level on the second floor, which I'll show you later. Here you'll find the intentionally discreet servant stairs where the enslaved individuals would go up and down between levels without being seen or heard. Note how the stairs are incredibly steep and hazardous with no handrails. And when you consider that the women wore very long skirts, you can imagine how dangerous these would be while carrying heavy loads. The staircases are a testament to the hierarchy and power dynamic between the home's owners and the enslaved community. There are two other important aspects of this layout. The first is that the house is designed so the enslaved people were intentionally hidden by these doors. This divided the enslaved from the family's private rooms by having this hallway and separate stairwell. The second is you can see how important symmetry was to the architect. Natural light was sacrificed by splitting the window. On one side is the servant staircase and the other the pantry. This was done to preserve the house's symmetrical exterior appearance. Down the hall, past the formal stairwell, you'll find the office, which is in the hyphen of the house. This was George Calvert's plantation office and study, and later his son's Charles Benedict. The wallpaper in this room has a fascinating story. It's called Chats du Campagna and tells the story of the hunt for a stag. They know it's the original pattern because a section of it was discovered behind a bookcase that was removed during restoration. A small section was sent to Philadelphia for restoration, and they identified the pattern. Finding a matching historic wallpaper for this pattern was doubly difficult because when it was first printed, this pattern was done in different color schemes. Riversdale was extremely fortunate that the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York was deascensioning a room in its museum that had the same print in the same color. The Riversdale Historical Society acquired the wallpaper and completed the restoration of this room. And here's a detail I love. The manufacturer actually numbered each sheet of the wallpaper, and you can see that here. This assured that the installer would get everything in the correct order. The last room we'll visit on the first floor is now an art gallery, but originally this room was a carriage house. It's very rare for a carriage house to be attached to the house in the United States during this period, but in Europe, where the Steer family was from, this wasn't so unusual. Initially, there would have also been a second story where the enslaved coachmen lived, one of whom was named Will Scott. Rosalie also used the upper level to store, in their original packing crates, the extensive art collection that her parents left behind when they returned to Belgium until shipping them back in 1816. Originally, this room was not accessed through this doorway, and you can tell that by this stairwell here. This was the second servant stairwell for this wing of the house, and it used to come down across here all the way across where you can see the door opening is now. This main stairwell has several interesting points I want to show you. It was originally designed to be freestanding, but Rosalie wanted extra storage and had the lower portion enclosed, as you can see here. At one point, her father had suggested that she put a toilet here because it was just becoming fashionable in Europe to do that, but Rosalie declined. At the base of the stairs, you'll notice it has a massive newel post. It was built to hold a statue, because it was fashionable at that time for Americans to travel to Europe and buy reproductions of statuary there and have them installed back at home. Rosalie wanted the statue here to hold a lantern or something similar to provide illumination to the space, but her father in Europe was not able to procure that. Rosalie did eventually find a statue to place in the newel post, as an 1838 inventory indicates. Today, the statue here is of Hebe, the cupbearer of the gods from Greek mythology. Another neat feature of the stairwell is this banister, which has a fingertip rail. That means the heart of the rail has been cut out so you can have a more comfortable grasp of the stair rail as you use the stairs. I'll also note that this stairwell was only to be used by the family who owned the house, not by the people they enslaved or employed. Now let's take a look at the upper level of the home. The first room likely would have been used as a guest room and originally had a long narrow closet on one side with room for sleeping mats. This was done because guests would need somewhere for their enslaved traveling with them to sleep when visiting. This bedroom is smaller than the others, but originally had the best view, a marble mantel, and a highly fashionable French daybed which would have been horizontally situated within this architectural alcove. Here's the children's bedroom section with 2 bedrooms. You may think it's odd that the children's rooms are so small, but they wouldn't have been spending much time in here. They really were just used for sleeping. And here is the second bedroom. It may also seem odd that the nursery is so much larger than the children's rooms, but this is because there would have been a wet nurse or other caretaker sleeping in the bedroom with the babies and small children. The room does have a fireplace, but since this was not considered an important room, it would have been a simple wooden mantel, not an ornate one like the parlor or guest rooms. You can see on this wall there's only one window here, but on the outside there's actually another window right here, and that's because it was split with this wall. If you go out into the hallway, you can see a portion of the window in the stairwell out there. Here you can see the servant stairs coming down from the upper level, and as you turn the corner, you'll find the mezzanine with the very low ceilings, and this is the cause of the low ceilings in the pantry below. This space contains a hallway that housed enslaved workers, and now we're in the basement of Riversdale. Here you can see the wine cellar where bottles and casks were stored. Wine was also decanted here by those enslaved at Riversdale before being brought upstairs to the butler's pantry and then the dining room to be served. Wine was shipped to Rosalie from her father in Belgium, but at least a cask of cider was produced here at Riversdale each year. There's also this large room where the enslaved people would have done work such as churning butter, creating cheese, sewing laundry, cleaning, and other tasks. There was no evidence that the enslaved people slept or lived in this space. An unusual feature of the basement is that the floors were made of brick, not dirt. That's likely due to strong evidence that the basement flooded. If you look here, you'll find that there's a French drain. A French drain is a trough that collects the water under the floor and drains it away. They were uncommon in this part of the world for the time that this was built. Just outside the north side basement entrance, it's cooler than on the south side. And this is important because this space was used as the dairy. Originally there were marble shelves and ice would have been placed in the dairy to keep milk, butter, and other dairy products cool and close at hand for the cooks. The ice would have been harvested from the lake on the property and stored in an ice well. While several enslaved men and women working in the house slept on premises, many more of them would have slept in crude outbuildings elsewhere on the property. There were at least 9 enslaved quarters on the property. Unfortunately, buildings constructed to house the enslaved rarely stand the test of time, so it's not unusual that they are no longer extant. Now let's talk about this building, which is just a few steps outside of the main house, and it's called a Dependency. Although it's not completely clear what this was originally used for, it's likely that it was a summer kitchen and then later the only kitchen. When the house was built, there was a kitchen inside, which was unusual for the time, so it's likely that the Dependency was added later. This structure dates to the mid-19th century, but the foundations date to the construction of the house, revealing that there were always some working outbuildings here to support the running of the main house. There are a couple of reasons that having a detached kitchen was practical. Should a fire have gotten out of control while cooking, having a detached kitchen would have lowered the risk of burning down the whole house. Another reason to have a detached kitchen is that it would help keep the main house cool in the summertime. You can actually see this kitchen in use when the Riversdale Kitchen Guild holds events here. The Guild uses historic recipes and demonstrates how to use the tools and techniques of open hearth cooking. They also use produce grown in the historic kitchen gardens managed by the historic site gardener. The Riversdale House Museum Historic Site has so much more to see than can be captured on a video. It's open and available for the public to visit, so check their website to verify dates and times. It's absolutely worth a visit, and I know I'll be coming back many times to see and learn even more. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you'll subscribe and turn on notifications so you can be with me the next time I visit another amazing property.